Hey, I'm Stephanie from Back to the Passport. Today, I'm sharing what we did in 2 days in Tokyo. We were recently in Japan on a trip with Go Ahead Tours, the Cherry Blossoms in Japan, Tokyo to Kyoto tour. And when all was said and done, we had spent about 2 full days in Tokyo, essentially 2 half days and 1 full day. We could have had one more full day in Tokyo, but we ended up booking a day trip to Kamakura instead, as we figured when we return, we'll probably be able to figure out what to do in Tokyo on our own, but probably wouldn't do the day trip on our own. Plus, the excursion looked really cool, so off we went to Kamakura for the day instead of spending it in Tokyo. But let's go ahead and get into what we did during our 2 days in Tokyo. We arrived at about 3:30 on Monday afternoon, made our way through customs and immigration. Quick side note, had no idea they take your fingerprints when arriving in Japan, but it was pretty easy, even though the lines were long. But then we were able to get through and meet our group and go head over to our hotel. So we checked into our hotel and had some time to freshen up or rest before meeting our group for dinner that night. And then after dinner, we went straight to bed to start adjusting to Tokyo time. On our first full day in Tokyo, we got up bright and early. Well, not so much bright as it was pouring rain, but early, for our sightseeing tour of Tokyo. We were staying in the Asakusa neighborhood, so we visited the nearby temple of Sensoji, and it's my sincere apologies because I'm probably going to butcher some names during this, and then we explored the neighborhood. The temple was free to visit, and it was gorgeous. It kind of sounds ridiculous, but I kept telling Rick it felt like we were at Epcot, but in real life. Which, duh, this was real life. We had time for some shopping and found our first of many vending machines, and I got a ridiculous little banana keychain for about 300 yen, so about less than $2. I'll be honest and say the weather was a bit of a downer, so we kind of just huddled inside the temple. It was also early, so we didn't need to purchase any snacks, and with the rain, I wasn't in the mood to buy souvenirs that may have gotten wet. We then got on our bus and drove around Tokyo before stopping at Yoyogi Park and seeing the Meiji Shrine. Both are also free to visit. The Meiji Shrine is dedicated to Emperor Meiji and his consort, Empress Shoken. Sadly, both the Emperor and Empress had already passed on before the shrine was finished in 1920. We had just enough time to see the shrine and walk the grounds and let the rain clear up a bit before we were back on the bus. Our next stop was the Harajuku neighborhood. Unfortunately, the rain had picked up again while on the drive over, so we didn't really feel like shopping and instead went and found a spot for lunch. We warmed up with some hot ramen, which was just what we needed, and it was super affordable. That is one thing I had heard about Japan before going, that everything would be really cheap for us. Like our lunch was under 4,000 yen, which showed up as about $25 on my credit card. And that was for 2 bowls of ramen and a large beer and a medium beer. I'm also really glad that we had a tour guide with us, as he was the one to help explain how to order and how it would be served. It really felt like the first time we went to Europe and we're kind of confused about just grabbing seats ourselves. I didn't fully know what to expect with dining out in Japan. So at the ramen place, we placed our order, paid, and then got in a line to be seated. We probably had to wait about 10 minutes, I guess, before seats opened up for us. And then the servers just know which order is yours and they bring everything right to you. And we also got a nice big carafe of water, which was greatly appreciated. After lunch, we were traveling with some friends, so they went off to do some shopping, and Rick and I just wandered and decided to see where the road would take us, and happened to cross a cute little park with a koi pond and a cherry blossom tree. It was our first sighting in Tokyo. We were so happy even though it was pouring rain. We then got back on the bus and visited the Shibuya Scramble Crossing. It was like Times Square in New York City, but also over hyperactive. I loved it, but I also don't mind crowded cities and bright lights. This too probably would have been more fun if it wasn't raining and we weren't trying to battle our way through a crowd of a million umbrellas. I'm joking, as most people were very respectful and good about not bashing others with their umbrellas. Word to the wise, get a clear umbrella if you want to blend in with the locals. You could always tell who was a tourist by the fact that their umbrella was not transparent. And if visiting a store or entering any building, please use the umbrella plastic bag dispenser to make sure that you're not dripping water all over the floor. That night, we were booked for one of the optional excursions offered through our tour group, a Japanese cooking class. So we went and we were greeted with a glass of sake or sparkling wine and then gathered around the main cooktop station to learn how to prepare our meal. We made an egg dish, a salad, and gyudon, a beef and onion dish. It was really neat making those dishes, and it was a good dinner, but I will say the excursion was described differently on the itinerary, and it ended up being a bit expensive for what we actually got out of it. I'm not mad we did it, but I don't know if we'd sign up for it again if we returned to Japan with the same tour company. But it was still a pretty unique experience and let us get more hands-on with the cuisine that we were enjoying in Tokyo. Like I said, on our full free day in Tokyo, we opted to go to the seaside city of Kamakura instead, but we did return to Tokyo around 5 p.m. We were already using the train, so we asked our tour guide what train to take to get to the Akihabara neighborhood. Our guide gave us instructions, and off we went. We didn't have any set plans, and I tried to find an owl cafe, and then when we found it, we found out that we actually needed reservations. So lesson learned there, if you want to visit any of the cute cafes, look them up online ahead of time to make a reservation or expect to wait. We ended up just exploring the area and taking in the extremely bright lights, loud sounds, and all the anime art decorating the buildings. I was on the hunt personally for a Sailor Moon plushie, but could only find action figures or honestly these little finger puppets, which I did purchase. I was living out my 7th grader fantasy and absolutely loved it. We did find a conveyor belt sushi restaurant, but the wait was something crazy like an hour and a half, so we honestly just ended up heading back to our neighborhood and finding somewhere to eat, and that was the Life Mart where we got some sushi on the cheap. We did make a quick detour to the iconic Don Quijote, a mega discount store, and I found an adorable oven mitt in the shape of a Shiba Inu, and he's about to eat some sushi. On our next day in Tokyo, we trolled through Tokyo for some cherry blossom sightings at Ueno Park. It was a bit hit or miss there. Some trees were popping and some still looked very closed up for the winter. It was kind of a shame because we could tell the park would be stunning when all of the blossoms were in bloom, but we were going to take what we could get. The park used to be the site of the Kenneji Temple, but the temple was destroyed in 1868 in a battle between the shogun loyalists and the new government. It was then converted into a public park and opened in 1873. The park is free to visit, and it also has a zoo and a few museums to check out. We had about 30 minutes at the park, which was fine since it only took about 7 minutes to find all the cherry blossom trees that were in bloom. Our next stop in Tokyo was to visit the gardens at the Imperial Palace, which is also free. We ended up seeing a lot of historical sites on the cheap during our time in Tokyo. We had about 45 minutes at the East Gardens of the Imperial Palace, and that was plenty of time to walk the trails, take in the stunning gardens, and neat buildings on the grounds. The blooms here were a bit hit or miss too, but it was fine because some of the other flora was amazing to look at, as well as some of the other historic sites. This park really reminded me of Central Park in New York City, as you're surrounded by all this greenery, but then there are some skyscrapers visible, and you realize you're in the center of a city. Afterward, we were getting ready to leave Tokyo, but we had one more stop at the observatory at the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building to see the city from above. This, too, was free to do. You just have to find the building and line up for the elevator. It was really neat to see the city from this viewpoint. Just due to the wait to get up to the top, we didn't have that much time to stay, but it was enough to get some good pictures of the city. Even with the clouds, we could still see a lot, and it was a beautiful vantage point. After looking down on the city, it was time to say goodbye, as it was time to start making our way to Mount Fuji and then on to Kyoto. I'm really happy with everything we were able to see and do in Tokyo with our travel itinerary, but I know that we still have so much more to see and do in this town. I cannot wait to plan a return trip to Japan. I love Tokyo, and even though Rick was more partial to Kyoto given its quieter vibes, I know I can convince him to spend at least another day or two in Tokyo when we do return. If you have any recommendations of what we should add to our next Tokyo travel itinerary, please feel free to share those in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Ciao!